welcome back to Normal But Not. Today, we're diving into a topic that is as layered as it is complex. Growing up with a fun or functional alcoholic parent. You know that parent, or for some, a family member, who was the life of the party, making jokes, bringing excitement, holding a full-time job, but also brought hidden dysfunction into the home? It may have felt normal back then, but 1 in 5 of us are affected by others drinking. As many of us come to realize, there's often hidden tension, unpredictability, and often unspoken pain. Many children grow up caretaking for parents with addiction and work tirelessly to protect the family secret, subconsciously learning that it isn't safe to talk, feel, or trust. Deep-rooted beliefs that can have a real detrimental impact on connection, self-care, self-worth, intimacy, vulnerability, and access to support later in life. I've invited an incredible guest here to help unpack this. Jess Frost is a self-leadership and empowerment coach for adult children of alcoholics and co-founder of the organization, The 3E Space, with her life and business partner, Nick Edgar. Jess works with adult children of alcoholics across the world, both one-on-one and in her group empowerment program, Courageous Healing, and peer support space, Courageous Connections. After 15 years of working in fast-paced recruitment sales and following a life-changing period of severe burnout and breakdown in 2017, Jess embarked on her empowering path back to herself, and she now helps others do the same. Jess is passionate about integrating a range of integrative tools into her holistic practice, including neurolinguistic programming, NLP, hypnotherapy, timeline therapy, parts work, EFT tapping, somatic EMDR, and conscious connected breathwork. Jess is on a mission to ensure as many adult children of alcoholics access healing and self-empowerment as possible. Together, we're going to explore how these seemingly fun dynamics impacted us in adulthood and how we can break out of the patterns that followed us from childhood. So, if you've ever wondered what you went through as normal, or just want to understand better, you're in the right place. So, Jess, thank you so much for coming here today. For those of you listening, if this is something that resonates with you, or you know somebody who has dealt with alcoholism, or alcohol has been a problem in their life, or family members, this is the episode for you. So thank you for tuning in. And thank you so much for joining us today, Jess, to help shed light on such a special and challenging topic.
Thank you so much for having me. It is an absolute privilege to be here and to be talking about such an important topic. So, yeah, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Welcome. So you're not here in the States. Where are you located, Jess?
I am in Nottingham, UK, smack bang in the middle of UK right now. The furthest you could be from the sea, unfortunately. But yeah, it's very cold, getting very dark here. We're in autumn, which I love, to be fair. So yeah, it's a little bit of a change of scene to where you are.
I will tell you, I'm in Los Angeles and it is 8 a.m. right now. I'm looking at my watch. It's actually 49 degrees Fahrenheit in Los Angeles right now.
Really? Oh my
hmm
God.
Yeah, it
It's
was about 99 degrees last weekend. So it is a huge change.
yeah, get out the cozy knitwear.
Oh, I had my heated blanket on yesterday. I'm
Same.
originally from Buffalo, where it snows all the time. And in fact, Buffalo, I was at a football game, an American football game, and there was a t-shirt that completely defined Buffalo, which was, "We are a drinking town with a sports problem." So I have definitely grown up around people who just like, they drink all the time, the bars are open till 4 a.m. It is, I'm probably similar to like pub life in the UK.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about your experience growing up in the UK and what alcohol, what the culture is like around alcohol for you.
Wow. So I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. So I found alcohol very young. Probably talking like when we were having like a Sunday roast as a family, like I'd have a Lambrusco. I don't know if you had Lambrusco, but it's like a fizzy wine with a slightly lower alcohol content. But it was like I wanted to be like the adults. I want to be
I
like the
think we
adults.
called
So
those wine coolers.
really, oh yeah, I was like, I want to be like them. So yeah, so alcohol played a big part in not just our family unit, but everywhere in the community. I grew up in quite a middle class UK village life, very close knit. Everyone knew each other. The parents would go down the pub and the kids would go and parent themselves somewhere over there, But it was it looked on the face of it very fun, but it was very alcohol fueled. There's lots of dinner parties. And yeah, I got a flavor for it at a young age, as did a lot of my peers. We'd be like, they'd have the dinner party and we'd like scoop the room and like get the booze and then go to a friend's barn and drink it like in secret. And it was fun, right? It was fun. It was like exciting. And then as I got into kind of my teens, we were in the 90s, right? And the 90s here in the UK, we had like this Britpop era. It was very much about, we called it ladette culture. So like the girls trying to be the lads, like drinking
Mm.
pints, like trying to drink the lads under the table. Like it was very glamorized to be like a tomboy and to drink pints of beer and be like the lads, whilst
Wasn't
also,
that also the time when like Chumbawamba, like the tub thumping song
yes,
was out,
tub
kissing the
thumping.
night away?
Yeah, tub thumping. We got Oasis versus Blur. Like it was, yeah, that kind of era. And I fell for that scene. I was like, this is a bit of me, right? I loved going down the pub with the lads. And yeah, it just became a part of my life. Like most of my memories involved booze, drugs, like pubs, parties, house parties. Yeah, it was a huge part of life. It still is. I grew up going to the football with my dad from a young age. Again, that little tomboy in me. But yeah, that would be like loads of alcohol. Just as soon as like Friday hit, it would be like, right, get on it, meet your mates down the pub. And that's just kind of, yeah, been a way of my life and a way of the culture growing up. But yeah, in terms of early life, those key years of working out who I was, you'd be very, very weird if you weren't drinking.
So you didn't fit in if you weren't drinking.
No, no way. I can't even imagine back then. It was like if you've not got a pack of cigarettes in your hands and you've not got a beer, that's how you fit in.
So,
That really
I
was.
talk a lot about like I talk a lot about people pleasing, which is really a symptom
Mm,
how we've grown up or how we've been conditioned. And in my first episode, I talk about, is it normal to be the good girl?
mhm.
And it really feels like, especially in your culture, and I think for many people who might be listening right now, that depending on their upbringing, that drinking was a way of being a good girl. If
Yeah,
that family culture was like, you should be participating in this, or the even the community. I mean,
yeah,
I remember my family growing up, Italian family, and it was, like you wine with dinner or whatever. But on holidays, we were allowed, and it was such a special thing. We were allowed to have champagne at the holiday, and we were allowed to take a sip with it. And, you know, I don't, my memory of those years was not, it's not 100% accurate, but I wouldn't have been surprised if it was like, no, I don't want any. If there was a family member who was like, no, no, have it, have it, have it. You have to have it. Everyone's drinking it. You're going to be fine. That there was like a family member around the Christmas table or something who was like, no, drink it. And if you didn't, as like the good girl or the good child, that you felt like, well, if I don't do it, I'm going to get in trouble. or I'm not going to fit in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a key era of our life, isn't it? Of like desperately wanting to fit in, desperately wanting to appease people. And yeah, we're like a chameleon. It's like, oh, what do I need to do to be accepted here? And
Hmm.
that was for most people, it was like, I need to feel confident in social situations. I know a lot of people that were like, I need to have a drink to feel like I can step into this social situation. But a lot of people, it's like, well, I'm going to get picked on, or like you say, I'm not going to be the good girl if I don't do this. So there's a lot of pressure there, a lot of social pressure.
Yeah. Now, getting back to the topic of like that fun alcoholic parent,
Mm,
what was it like growing up around your parent who was drinking at the time? Did it seem like a typical something that would be portrayed in the movies where they were irate or they were throwing things or doing something that seemed like what you would see on a movie as like this is an alcoholic parent?
yeah. Great question. And yeah, I think for many of us, like especially a few years ago, the role of an alcoholic, you almost pictured them with like the alcohol in a paper bag and they're on a bench and they're homeless or they're drinking at like 6 in the morning. And my experience was that most people drank heavily. Like it was a way of life. My parents, I saw them very stressed a lot of the time. And I'd got my dad who really struggled with his mental emotional health. He was a very highly sensitive man, very spiritual, was always searching for his purpose. He was a creative, he worked in the arts. And yeah, he was, when in my younger years, kind of in and out of psychiatric care. So we'd be visiting him in hospital. And then when he wasn't in hospital, he wasn't able to work. So we saw him very depressed, very dark. And my mum, on the other hand, had to be the breadwinner. So she was just constantly busy, off and out of the house. And both of them medicated with alcohol. It was there for good days, bad days, indifferent days. It was just what the family did to unwind, right? And what my parents were always the party couple. Like they used to tell me and my sibling about the party days before we came along, where it would be their house was the party house. They'd often get dressed up and they'd be wearing like fancy dress and they got the vinyl out and they were big music fans. And they would be, share, there'd be drugs, there'd be alcohol back in the 60s, 70s. Do you know what I mean? Like they had a lot of laughs and they were the life and soul of the party, right? A lot of people saw them like that. I did when I saw them at dinner parties. There was so much laughter, so much great music, such great vibes. And if I'm honest with you, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of adult children of alcoholics will resonate with this, often my parents were at their happiest and I felt safest in that first or second drink that they were having,
Mm,
where
would
they
it
were like, they were warm, loving. It's always like as soon as they got that drink in hand, their shoulders went down, you know. So yeah, that's it. That's been an interesting reflection for me recently, that actually, there was periods of their drinking where actually that was fun and it was a laugh and we felt connected.
So it was like without the alcohol, there may have been some tension. And with one or two drinks, that was the sweet spot. I was like, this is great. I can connect with them. It took the edge off from for them, whether it was because of some of the emotional things your father was going through or from what you mentioned,
Mm,
your mother, whatever was going on with her, that also helped take the edge off for her, and it was a connection. And I'll tell you, I'm not somebody, I don't drink at all right now, um and there when I did drink, it was one, maybe two.
mm,
I'm I don't respond very well to alcohol. I don't feel good from it. But there would be like, there was one time I had a drink. We were in Hawaii and I have daughters. They're 11 and 13. And right now, and my daughter was like, "Oh, mom, you're so fun." And hearing that, I thought to myself, like, well, I want to be fun without it. And I think I am fun without it. And I really just don't want my daughter to think that you have to have a drink in order to be fun. Like that was the very first thought that I had in my head.
Mm.
And maybe it's because I did grow up around people who did drink a lot.
Yeah.
I have memories of like, we had a cottage growing up, and the one memory I have of a family member, and I'm being vague for a reason, but anyone listening, like my siblings, they know which family member I'm talking about. But like I had a family member who we would be sitting around in the backyard of our cottage, and there was a refrigerator, like, I don't know, 400 feet in the backyard from where we would sit. And he would be like, go get me a beer. And so
Mm.
we'd walk and get a beer, bring it back. And by the time we brought it back, he'd be asking another one of us to go get another beer. And like
Mm.
our memories growing up were just always getting this person a beer from the fridge at the cottage over the summer. And that to me was like, oh, well, this person's an alcoholic because all he does all day long is drink beer.
Mm.
And, but like there were other people I grew up around who like I didn't normalize as an alcoholic because they weren't constantly asking for alcohol. And maybe they were drinking, maybe it was in their drink, I didn't know, or they drink less than this person. And they
Mm.
were, to your point, like just a fun time to be around. So
Yeah.
it felt normal. It didn't feel like alcoholism, but looking back, it really wasn't. It was hidden, or there would be other things that came from
Mm.
it later on. With that in mind, you know, you and I are both very aware of this, that when we grow up in these environments, we adapt. And something I've mentioned before in previous episodes, there's a great psychologist. His name is Terry Real, and he says what was adaptive then is maladaptive now.
Yeah.
And if anyone out there is familiar with this, I know you are, that there are these roles that we take on growing up as adult children of alcoholics, and maybe even like adult nieces or nephews or grandchildren.
Yeah.
But the roles are enabler, the hero, the scapegoat, the lost child, and the mascot. So can you talk a little bit about these roles, maybe how they develop and how they serve us as children, and how they really are no longer normal as adults and how they can affect us later on?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what I love about the roles is that this is where people tend to resonate, right? And this can be used, these roles can be looked at in a wide range of dysfunctional environments, right? We're going to talk to alcoholism, right? But one thing to mention, I think, with the word alcoholic is a lot of people dismiss that term. Right. And when we talk about these roles, I really encourage people just to kind of be open and curious. This isn't, by the way, I want to preface, pointing finger at anyone with addiction. It's not even pointing the finger about alcohol here. Really passionate about that. Like my dad's drinking spiraled massively to more so of what an alcoholic and Bunny is would look like, where he lost the family, was in a halfway house, probably going to be homeless, would be drunk whenever I saw him on the street, right? That's an extreme, but I want people to hopefully listen to this and be able to validate their own experience of, even if someone who doesn't use the term alcoholic, doesn't
Right.
mean you're not affected by the drinking. But rather than
And
just focusing, sorry, Dal, go on.
no, I was going to say, I think that's really important what you just said there, which is why I wanted to reiterate
Mm,
it. Um, a friend of mine worked in, or still works in, rehab centers. And when asked, what defines an alcoholic, he will say that an alcoholic is only defined when the person who is affected, or the person who's drinking, states that they are an alcoholic, because until they recognize that it's a problem, they're not technically, by definition, an alcoholic. So I think it's more important about what you said, that if you are affected by alcohol, because it's not necessarily just the person drinking, it is the people around them who are also affected by alcohol.
100%. Like we could talk a whole podcast just on what alcoholism is. And I think it's such an important conversation. It's very complex, it's very individual, it's very nuanced. Like if I was to go on the UK NHS website, I'll read you what it says an alcoholic is, for example. But it says if someone loses control over their drinking and has an excessive desire to drink, it's known as dependent drinking, in brackets, alcoholism. Dependent drinking usually affects a person's quality of life and relationships, but they may not always find it easy to see or accept this, exactly like what you said, right? I think sometimes the easiest question to ask is it affecting me mentally, physically, behaviorally? Is it relationally affecting me? But the work I do with adult children of alcoholics, it isn't like you say, waiting for that person to put a label to it. Labels can be good and they can also be not very helpful. So asking that question, is my drinking affecting me? Is it affecting areas of my life? And then if you are in a relation to someone who's struggling with alcohol, is their drinking affecting me? And the roles are a fascinating illustration of how we protect the family secret, right? We
Mm,
talked about that at the beginning. What happens when you grow up around any addictions within the family home from a young age is that we subconsciously absorb the beliefs: don't talk, don't feel, don't trust, right? No one sits you down in a chair and goes, we don't talk here, we don't feel, we don't trust. But you
right.
subconsciously make those assumptions off the basis of your environment. You're like, whoa, okay, we're not safe here to show our emotions. We're not safe to express fully. I cannot trust because of the eggshell living myself or other people and all this kind of stuff. So it's a very much a subconscious thing. But first of all, we'll obviously talk to the addict in an alcohol family. Okay. So you've got the person that's struggling with addiction. In this case, we're going to talk to alcohol, but that could be a number of different things. It could be drugs, it could be gambling, various different things. But that person in that addiction can become very self-absorbed. They might point the finger elsewhere and blame everything else. But they're going to very much exhibit that kind of explosive eggshell living,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
emotional kind of explosion. So not necessarily, like you were saying, it doesn't have to be violence necessarily, or some things that you might see in films, but they're probably very unpredictable in their behavior. And they might have emotional explosions. For me, I watched my parents, yeah, just lose their shit, for the better word. They were just very little patience. When there was hangovers, they just weren't there emotionally.
Hmm.
There would be emotional explosions at times, but yeah, a lot of depression, a lot of mental health struggle. Then you've got an enabler slash caretaker. Now, this could be the spouse, it could be the person in a love relationship with this person, this person struggling with addiction, or it could be a child. We can fall into all these different roles, okay? But yeah, they take on this enabler slash caretaker role. That person is very much living with codependency,
Hmm.
um, get enmeshed with the addict. What happens is when we are high functioning codependent, our self-worth gets attached to rescuing and fixing, right? This plays out, which I'm sure we'll talk about into later things in life, later relationships, later dynamics, but it can be dangerous in the sense that that person might enable the addiction further because
And
what's
it
happening is they get to jump in and fix it.
right. And it can look like things that are very surface, which is going to the liquor store and buying the alcohol for
Hmm.
the person affected by by alcohol, right?
Hmm.
The user, the addict.
Yeah.
And it can also look like, somebody to say, hey, this is this, if somebody were to say to the enabler, you need to leave this person. You need to stop providing for this person. Their response is likely something to the effect of, well, if I leave or if I stop helping, then I don't know what's going to happen to them. They
Yes.
might die. And they think that that person's livelihood depends on the enabler.
Hmm.
And because, as you said, they're so enmeshed that they
Yeah.
don't know how that person will survive without them.
Exactly, exactly. It can become at times self-righteous, better than. But yeah, it's very much a subconscious process of keeping this dynamic between the two of you going. What they might want to do as well is portray a very happy, healthy household outside the house. And that's again for the children involved, that can be very confusing because you've got what's happening behind closed doors, and then you've got what happens when you step out of that door and you see a neighbor, and it's like, hi, but you had
Hmm.
a lovely childhood. They'll very much want to protect the good nature of the family.
Right.
So
And that
they're the
can look
kind of,
like excuses
yeah,
and things like that. So that's where the
yeah,
confusion comes in a
yeah,
lot.
exactly,
If
exactly. But, go on, Dar, sorry.
sorry, if an enabler were to be aware of what is happening with them and they wanted to seek help
Yeah.
and make a change, what would their initial course of action be?
That's a great question. For me, I can talk to my own lived experience. I started off as the hero child, which I'm going to go through in a moment, and I noticed in myself some enabling and caretaking. And I, when I came to Nottingham, because I had a breakdown in 2017, I was working out in New York, and I came back to the UK to like rebuild my life. And I was listening to a podcast on codependency. I just heard the term. I was like, what the hell is this? And I was listening to it and I heard them use the term manipulation. And I was like sucker punch. Like me? What? And that was the moment of like penny dropping, that I am playing out some toxic behaviors too. And I'd always got a desire to be of service for people. I was fascinated with psychology. I studied it at university. I wanted to be a therapist or a coach. I wasn't sure. And it was the moment of the penny dropping where I was like, I need to sort this out because I cannot go into a role of service with, within mental health and coaching and healing with codependency, where
Hmm.
the results are linked to my self-worth and to me potentially coming in and swooping in and trying to make everyone better and heal and fix everyone. So I would say if you identify with that codependency of, oh, actually, I do tend to fix and rescue and forget myself and forget my own needs and just jump on in, that's the first amazing thing, is that awareness of like, okay, this is probably not healthy. There is lots of different ways that you can explore this. There's like traditional therapeutic routes that you could go down that allow you to build that like intellectualized awareness and cognitive awareness of these patterns. Um, for me, I'm sure we'll go into it in a bit more detail, but for me, it was a real mixture of like, I did internal family systems work, IFS, they call it, coaching, being able to be held accountable to making these changes. So it wasn't about completely ridding myself of all these ways that I've learned to live my life, but it was about consciously building that awareness to catch myself when I was like, oh, I can notice a part of me wanting to come in and rescue this situation,
Hmm.
or like enable this toxic behavior that's happening. And me and my partner Nick will still catch ourselves like, whoa, what happened there? That didn't feel healthy.
Yep. And
So
talk about awareness for in almost every episode so far, as far as actionable steps. Awareness is that first step for exactly the reason that you
yeah,
mentioned, is that you can catch yourself because you're like, oh, I see it now. Whereas before you may not have seen it. And similarly, um, and I'm dying to hear you talk about the hero role, because I myself have identified as a hero, and also have recognized the patterns of codependency. And I'll just add in, and I don't know if it's the same in the UK, but here in the States, we have something called Codependence Anonymous. And I had taken myself to Codependence Anonymous. And that was very helpful for me. I'm very much a self-starter. Maybe it's the hero role. I'll say that eventually. But it was, I got the workbook and I was like, I'm gonna work through these steps on my own and I'm gonna figure it out. And made great progress doing that. But it was just really identifying like I don't have control over things. And for very similar reasons, I also have a degree in psychology and like I cannot help other people if I think that the only reason I'm doing it is because I'm, getting a reward or I'm like, you know, getting something out of it because of the codependency that exists here. So, um,
Love that.
absolutely amazing. Okay, hero role. I
Let's
knew I'd
go.
get it.
No, I love that. And we do have Codependence Anonymous over here as well in the 12-step program. So yeah, it works for many. The hero, okay. The hero can often be the eldest sibling, doesn't have to be, but that was what it was for me. I was the eldest daughter, and the hero can be quite prominent with daughters as well. I think that like natural conditioning to be nurturing. But the hero tends to attach themselves to achieving, might gather certificates, might be the A-star pupil. Yeah, they want to please everyone. They struggle often with perfectionism. They can be like the therapist and friend to the parents as well. So yeah, being kind of an adult before their years, let's say, having to grow up very quickly, shouldering a lot of the weight of the problems of the family, but whilst keeping a positive attitude and making sure that please everyone and you go out and do your best and then present that to the world, right? So yeah, the hero, some say that the hero can sometimes be linked with let's say for example in the parental relationship there is traits of real toxicity and narcissism. The eldest sibling can almost be groomed for some of that as well, so groomed to really protect that secret, not let anyone call out any of the problems within the family. So the hero can often kind of side with some of the parents that really want to make sure that no one sees what's going on. A lot of pressure on that child's shoulders. Okay. So yeah, the hero, I've been there.
Well, it also makes sense between the transition based on that definition of like the grooming to keep the secret from hero to enabler as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you got the hero to enabler. I transitioned from the hero, and once I started doing the work and once I started like peeling back the veil, it became more black sheep, scapegoat, which can be really hard, which I know we'll talk about as well, of what support's available when you do go through that, of kind of seeing things for what they might be. But yeah, there's a lot of pressure on those shoulders. I work with mostly heroes, who literally, when they start doing somatics, start to notice the weight that their body's shouldering and how much that starts manifesting physically, for people with like whether it's autoimmune, gut problems, like pain, like you name it. So that's the hero. I'm sure many people will resonate with that. We've got the mascot, who tends to be like the class clown. I can see it in my family dynamic who falls into that role. I'm grateful to them at family dues and social situations because they're like, they'll sort everyone out, they'll entertain everyone. Like they come in, they put the mask on, and it's like we're gonna make everyone laugh. Probably a bit like toxic positive, love and light, like let's look on the happy side of life, let's have a joke about it. So yeah, they might be into like amateur dramatics. They are the performer. They are an amazing
Hmm.
performer, and that might translate into lots of different areas of their life. Um, then you've got the lost child, which the lost child tends to fade into the background, tends to disappear. Um, and I can, again, there's not enough siblings in my family for them to be one of each. I want to say that sometimes you might be an only child and see lots of these in yourself. But yeah, there are times when that child might just kind of disappear, do their own thing. They might isolate themselves. They might be a big dreamer and live in a fancy world, maybe a bit of a gamer, be on their own. And then you've got the scapegoat and the black sheep, which I kind of spoke to earlier, but I describe the black sheep as they're the highly sensitive ones in the family. They're the intuitive ones. they're the ones that start to go, there's something happening here. They might be shamed for their emotional experience, for their sensitivities. Um, and then you've got the scapegoat that can be the in bunny like bunny ears, the naughty one, the problem
Hmm.
child, the one that's getting into trouble here, there, and everywhere, the one that might be expressing themselves emotionally and being shut down for that. Often it's the child that's having quite a normal response to their environment that gets labeled with the scapegoat and the black sheep kind of titles, right? But for a lot of the time, they're seeing things for what that is really happening. Um, and yeah, a lot of people that kind of start noticing what's happening, start wanting to empower themselves, start wanting to break free from some of these dynamics. Sadly, if the family aren't able to hold that change, if that threat to the system is so big, because if you remove some of these roles, it's going to take a lot for that system, that family system, to rejig and recalibrate. It's not, it can't withhold it. So yeah, that's why a lot of people get singled out. A lot of people end up having to step away. Some people I work with are no contact for that very reason. So each of the roles hold a lot of weight. No one would aspire to kind of be in this situation for their life. It's a big pressure to hold to fulfill these roles. A lot of weight to be carrying, but being able to, like you say, recognize it, build that awareness, go, how is this impacting me and my relationships? Because these aren't isolated roles. These roles will play out in the rest of your life.
Yep. And that's the thing. Some people may have thought that the way been behaving their whole lives has been normal. And
Mm.
it's not until maybe they reach adulthood or something happens in their interpersonal relationships that they realize that it's not. And
Yes.
they may, and maybe they're fine. Maybe they're married and their relationship with their spouse or their partner is totally normal. But
Mm.
their partner is the one who points out something that's not.
Yes.
And maybe you find your partner points out to you like that you are loyal to a fault, that you're the person who, like you keep kosher and you ordered something that was kosher on the menu and they bring you lobster and you don't send it back because you're afraid that you are going to upset the server or the person at the restaurant. And you're like, that's not normal. Like, you did not order that. And what do? You sit there and you pretend to eat it, you pack it up, you can't even eat it, you can't even bring it in your house. Then you go home and you eat bread and butter later. Like, maybe that's your first epiphany to like something's not normal here. Or maybe you're listening to this podcast for the first time and you're like, wait a minute. I do overachieve, or I did have all of the certificates in high school or college or whatever. And that explains why I'm constantly going, 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 going. And if somebody tells me I'm lazy, I believe them because I
Mm.
was so used to being the hero growing up. Now all of this is finally coming together, and I'm realizing what I always thought was normal is not. By the way, my cat, you guys haven't noticed, wants to be the star of the show. So this is
Oh,
Oliver.
gorgeous.
Oliver.
So
So
gorgeous. Oh my
yeah, he's a
God.
ham. He's a ham. But yeah, I mean, it's all very interesting. I mean, even the lost child, I
Mm.
think sometimes has those tendencies to be that loyal to a fault because they don't want to be brought into the spotlight because they never were as a child before. And the
Yeah.
mascot, whether they were the class clown or they were the family entertainer,
Yeah.
that's how they're compensating in life now, right? Like they're trying to just be the life of the party. And maybe they've also become the alcoholic
Yes.
because that's how they know how to entertain people and that's how they relax. And
Yeah.
these are all those adaptive things as youth that have become maladaptive. And as you mentioned, the mask that is being put on is exactly that. It's a mask. And so to be able to live authentically doesn't come naturally to
No.
any of these different adaptations that those children have taken on.
Yeah.
So um, let's get into let's get into the journey. Let's get into the
Yeah.
journey of healing. We've talked about so many things, and you are very skilled in helping people. And you've mentioned, I went in your bio, we talked about somatics, and you mentioned it, EMDR, which is something that I've personally done, and I think is an amazing, amazing tool to help people. Um, let's talk about specific tools or exercises, some things that maybe people can do at home on their own. And EFT, I remember that one too, because I do that as well. Some things that people can do at home on their own, and then some things that you might recommend for people to seek out and
Yes.
get a professional. You are a professional in this area, but also if you're not available because you're so booked up, what can people do and look for?
So I think there's some really powerful tools to continue this exploration. This might be the first time that you're noticing some of these things, right? In yourself, some of these roles are playing out, like you just said, maybe in relationships, some things are bubbling to the surface. Maybe you're burning out at work. Maybe you're physically seeing manifestations of the past coming to haunt you. And I think if you can continue that curiosity, like whether you are a journaler, like being able to just get curious about behaviors. Okay. Oh, I noticed I behaved in that way today. What were the thoughts that are rattling around my head? Because these these roles that we play, these dynamics that we fall into, so much of it is related to self-worth, shame, disconnection from self. Like I firmly believe, right? And there's so many different definitions of addiction and alcoholism, but for me, genuinely, from looking at my own family's history and my own life, is that a lot of it is born from just complete disconnection from self, and that it's so uncomfortable to be in the body, so uncomfortable to feel the emotional experience that is bubbling under the surface, that alcohol is just the addiction's a symptom. Like there's this very highly marketed, easily accessible substance. I'm not shocked that people become addicted to it and that people can keep trying to avoid themselves. So the more we can do to continue that exploration of self and that curiosity of, what thoughts do I have a lot of the time? Because sometimes we never realize that like we're caught in this repeated pattern. We've got all these thoughts rattling around our head. 90% of them are bloody cruel. Like, what is my thoughts at the moment? What's going on for me? What's happening in my body? Like, can I feel any aches and tension going on in my body right now? Like, I'm gonna get an emotions wheel. We love an emotions wheel, and like have a look about how am I really feeling? Like, what's triggering me at the moment? And just start to build that compassionate self-inquiry for what's happening in your inner world.
I want to add to what you said too, because there's 2 points that go along with what you said. One with the journaling, where you mentioned that there's all these thoughts that go around in your
Yeah.
head, and many of them are cruel, right?
Mm,
And I have found in my own experience and with my clients as well, some who have been very resistant to the journaling process at
mm,
first, and they just had done it. The way I've described it before is anyone who has ever read or watched Harry Potter. There is this scene where Dumbledore takes his wand and he pulls the thoughts out of his head and he puts them into the pensive. And for me and my clients, once they've done it, they're like, ah, yes, this is exactly true. Because when those thoughts are in your head and they are spinning and spiraling, and you're just thinking about them over and over and over again, they can take over, and you do want to avoid them. You want to run away. You want to take on whatever the substance is that you're addicted to. And we're talking about alcohol here, but sometimes it's food,
Yeah.
sometimes it's drugs, sometimes it's a lot of things. And
Yeah.
food, by the way, is the easiest one because it doesn't feel bad.
Hmm.
Um, and and with alcohol, though, with what we're talking about here, and this is my second point, is that the other piece of that that I think leads people to using alcohol as their addiction is that it is a social thing. And not always, but it can be, right? So you're getting away from yourself. You're getting
Yeah.
away from being alone with your own thoughts so that you go out and you party with other people
Mhm.
and you forget about what it is that's bothering you.
Yeah.
And if you can sit with that discomfort and put it out on paper, it is like taking the wand and
Mhm.
pulling those thoughts out of your mind. And when they go on the paper, and you don't have to worry about grammar or handwriting or anything else, you just jot them down.
Mm.
It is like removing those thoughts from your head and removing the discomfort and putting them on paper, and that's where they live.
Yeah.
It is like taking that weight, that pressure on your chest, wherever it is in your body, and leaving it somewhere else
Yeah.
without having to turn to that substance or whatever else it is that's
So true.
your release.
So true. If we think back to like a lot of the people that have grown up around addiction don't feel safe to talk or feel or trust, right? It has to be a slow process. Not many people get to the point straight away where they're like, cool, I'm going to get a therapist. Like that part might step up. They go, no, we can handle this on our own. It's fine. So yeah, being able to do these in private to start with and just get
Mhm.
curious. And like you say, like build that resilience to being with yourself. I remember when someone mentioned mindfulness to me and I was like, I can't sit, I couldn't sit with it. And that's exactly like what we talk about with addiction is it's like almost like painful, like skin crawling to sit in. Like I had so much unhealed and unprocessed trauma. I'd lost family members to suicide, like, and it was never talked about, never dealt with. And like just sitting with any emotion that was deemed negative was like hell on earth. And being able to practice and experiment. I'd say experiment with a range of different things that you can try at home, of like, yeah, some of the journaling where you can let the paper hold it for you. But, jumping on some online sessions where you can have your camera off and kind of dabble in whether it is some meditation or breath work or something that gives you an opportunity to have a bit of a self check-in and realize that like everything that's happening on the internal world is likely happening to try and protect you. It's like a conditioned survival mode from how you've had to be throughout your life. And I think this links really beautifully to like some of the next level stuff that people can start to do. I'm going to speak to this from an adult child of an alcoholic perspective, but it can be really powerful for any trauma healing. But it's why I love internal family systems therapy. Internal family systems therapy, or IFS, as a lot of people call it, started off as a therapy to help people with eating disorders. But what IFS does is, and it's so beautifully linked to the roles of dysfunction, you can start to explore some of the parts of you that were formed to protect you from a very, very young age. So it's likely as a result of these roles that you've had to play in the family, the fact that from a very young age, it's likely you disconnected your mind from your body to survive. You disconnected from your innate power and your intuition. You shut off your internal safety gauge that tells you which humans are safe and which aren't, right? Why we get stuck in, narcissistic, toxic relationships. We turn all that off. And what IFS does is, with a compassionate eye, we get to map out parts of us that were born to protect us, that were adaptive back then and got us through. And now in adulthood are showing up and they're driving the bus And we're like, no, no, no. We don't want this one driving the bus. So that that could be looking at all the parts of you that play all of the roles. I can see that I've got the hero and the perfectionist and the overachiever, but I've also got the one that likes to laugh and joke and cover over the reality of my emotional experience. It's
Hmm.
also got the caretaker and the enabler, the scapegoat, and I've also got the part of me that wants to drink a lot of red wine and to not talk about my feelings, the part of me that will slam doors and walk away and avoid a conflict, and the part of me that wants to get so fucking angry and literally set fires everywhere. Like, and being able to kind of understand that these beautiful parts of me were frozen in time and they have worked their asses off to protect me. And they've been, controlling my thoughts and controlling my emotions and controlling my behaviors. But what I get to do now is I get to step into the self leader within me, right? This beautiful self energy, which is in every single one of us, by the way, everyone, right? It's this innate, nurturing, protective energy where we are calm, we're connected, we're confident, we're curious, we're courageous, all of the beautiful C's. And we get to step more into that. And we get to show these parts of us that it's okay. We see them, we hear them, we're not getting rid of them, right? They're a part of us now, but they don't need to control everything. Like, I've got this now. I'm the adult.
And when you didn't see those before, you couldn't, not only were you ignoring them, the bad parts of them, but you couldn't harness the power behind those parts as
Yeah.
well. You couldn't grow from them either.
No, there's like, and you can be as spiritual and as woo woo with this. That's why I love IFS. It can be quite spiritual, right? It's like this source energy. It's like this connection to ourselves, but also the universe and source. But what these parts of us do is they protect very wounded inner children in us. Like the effects for a lot of children growing up around addiction is horrendous neglect and emotional
Mhm.
abuse. And that has such an impact on people's inner children. And it means that we can't play in adulthood. Like I really struggled with being able to be like joyous and carefree and have fun. Like I still do to a certain extent have a phobia of games. So if someone says, let's play a game, my palms sweat, my heart beats out of my chest, and my head's going, oh God, like get out of here, get like literally flight. And I struggle to be in feelings of things going well because
Mhm.
those parts of me come up that go, whoa, shit, no, be hyper vigilant because some crisis is around the corner. Like something's going to go awfully wrong. Someone's going to die. Like, and it like forebodes any joy, any glimmers, any goodness. And what we get to do with IFS and somatics, where we can build safety in the body once more, is we get to see these protectors for who they are, love them, and thank them for everything that they've done, but go, it's not serving me now for you guys to be controlling everything. So you go play. You can step in, you can even come back at certain times. Like there's times when I really need my tough girl, right? I need her there because she's like, I'll fucking fight them if they come at you. So like
Right.
I get to choose that, but it's a conscious choice in adulthood. And I've built that self-connection that I was never able to safely build when I was an infant because my parents weren't able to. They just weren't able to be present in that sense. So I get to give that to myself, which is the most incredible journey. But also, my trauma doesn't go away. The effect that it has, I'm not getting rid of it, but I'm loving myself through it and I'm finding better ways to cope. So that's not the only way. There's obviously different like traditional therapies, talking therapies, EMDR, which is massive for processing some of the kind of stuck memories that we
Hmm.
get stuck in trauma. Um, there's like EFT tapping, like I use a lot of subconscious tools to rewire some of the beliefs that some of these parts are holding. And if you did IFS therapy, for example, what they'd help you do is they'd help your parts to unburden, they call it. So that weight that they're carrying, they can start to let go of the weight they're frozen in childhood, likely. So they're likely very young parts. So they get to become kids again. And that's when we start to enjoy the light and the joy and the play and the pleasure and the intimacy and all of that beautiful stuff.
And I,
So,
I
yeah.
sorry, I just want to speak to that too. Like with the IFS, it sounds like a lot of that inner child work, where I want to say this about families of the generations who were in probably our parents'
Mm,
generation. And a lot of that, if you've done, anyone who's listening has done any research on generational trauma, our parents behaved a certain way because their parents behaved a certain way, and so on and so forth. And each generation really does their best to try to do better than the generation before, but we're carrying traumas with us, and many of it is behavioral. Much of it is behavioral, and some of it is also hereditary, right? Like the eggs
mm,
in the grandmother were the same eggs that we carry in ourselves because
yeah.
of biological stuff I don't want to get into right now. But the point is that, like, what we were missing as a child, like when I think back to my parents' generation, there was a lot of and this is whether you had parents who were alcoholics and functional alcoholics
Mm,
or not. um, they were coming from a place of wanting the best for us as kids. And what they grew up with a lot of times was their idea of doing the best was telling you sometimes, like, you're going to be fine. And that message of you're going to be fine may have come across as dismissive, and you don't need to worry about it. And so you didn't get to go through the process of going through your emotions or talking about it and doing the things that maybe you needed to as a child. So as Jess, you're pointing out, when you were a child, you didn't get to necessarily talk about or process the things that you needed to, which is why you're, as adults, we're doing all of that work now.
mm,
And part of that inner child work is being that parent to
mm,
that 7-year-old version of yourself. You're doing that to yourself and letting that version come out now as an adult, and do play-based things and so on. And it's also that journaling that you're talking about. It's that EMDR, which, for those of you who are unaware, as Jess mentioned, that rewiring of the brain, it looks different in different settings, but it can be following a light bar with your eyes. It can be physically tapping, and
mm,
it can generate old memories. But I mean, in my experience, it was I followed a light bar with my eyes, and it was almost like going through a dream sequence of memories where things were connected, and they didn't necessarily make logical sense. But by the end of it, if on a scale of 1 to 10, a certain memory was like an 8. By the end of it, it really felt like a 3, because you're processing it and you're wiring a different neural pathway so that it doesn't have that same trauma response that it did at the beginning of it. And sometimes at the end of the session, you're like, "Ooh, I am wiped out and I'm super exhausted by this." And sometimes at the end, you feel like this was like, I am a different person. But
mm,
there are many different therapies and things out there that can help you through this. And we are so much more aware. We don't have to be like, you don't have to feel bad. You don't have to be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this because that means I had terrible parents growing up. You didn't necessarily. Like, some of us might have. Like,
mm,
that's a true fact. Some of you might have had terrible parents, and I'm sorry that was
yeah,
your experience. And some of you might have had fun alcoholic parents. You might have had functional alcoholic parents. You might have had normal parents who now you're realizing were not. And seeking therapy is not saying that there was anything wrong. Your parents were doing the best that they could. They wanted to help you the best way they knew how with the tools that they had.
yeah,
And what you're doing now by seeking out new tools is you're helping yourself.
yeah,
And if you are a parent yourself, then what you're doing is you're helping yourself so that you can help your children.
Yeah,
and break the cycle and give them a better life than you had when you were a child.
that's exactly it. Like mic drop, because I think sometimes we can be quite like black and white thinking. Another trauma response. But having duality, being able to lean into nuance when you're on a healing journey is so important. Well, quite rightfully, what you said, I can look back and I can genuinely go, I have beautiful memories of my parents. I have beautiful memories of my family. I have beautiful memories of the things we did together, right? I can also go, they did the best they could, right? And I can also go, but it wasn't enough. And I deserved more. And that's so beautiful. I think when it comes to community, one of the best things I can say when you feel safe to, because some people, again, don't feel safe to jump straight into community settings. They like to work one to one first. It's whatever's going to make you feel safer to take the first step. But there was something so incredibly healing for me about being in space with other ACOAs and sharing my story, which my protector part, had gone, it's not that bad. I'd shared it out loud, and other people were like, that sounds fucking tough, Jess. And like that corrective experience for my inner family system of hearing those words that I often don't get from my own family was so powerful. And I think it's about being able to validate yourself. You can hold both. You
Hmm.
can go, this is not sustainable for me anymore. I'm doing my best, but there are things bubbling to the surface that I can't ignore anymore. And it's like you said, choosing to be that cycle breaker, whether you've got kids or not, if it ends with me. Like I can appreciate that there's these legacy burdens, as we call it in IFS, these burdens generationally that have been carried down. And the fact that, us British lot, we're so stoic and we don't talk about our feelings. Like, I love you guys. You do therapy like it's normal. Over here, it's like, what? And I can appreciate that that's how people have been raised, whilst also going, this does not work for me. I can't live like that, and being able to give whatever you need, only you. And you don't need to heal with the permission of a parent. You
Hmm.
don't even need to go there and share anything. Your healing journey is for you, right? And it's whatever is the next best step for you that's going to gift you a bit of that healing experience and a healthier way of being.
And like you said, that community process, I remember being hesitant to it at first as well. And there is a lot of healing that can take place. And what there's so much available online now, as you mentioned before, where you can just sit with your camera off and just listen. And you don't have to be an active participant, but you can be a passive one and see if that's the right place for you or if anything resonates there. And really just know that you're not alone, which basically starts that kind of wraps up where we started, which is that sense of belonging and wanting to fit in and know that you're just not off to the side and that you don't stand out in the crowd. And if you go back to our basic level of needs, it's Maslow's, I think, hierarchy of needs, right? Like you have food, shelter, clothing, sleep, and a sense of belonging. And without that sense of belonging, also, we really are not having those basic level of needs met. So if you are open to at some point joining a community, it can be as basic as having a camera off, joining online, muted, and that's, dipping a baby toe in, or just even listening to podcasts. Or speaking of communities, you've got Jess's Instagram community. She's at I am Jess Frost on Instagram. She's got some really great content out there. And there's a lot of this both and thinking, right? Like it's okay to say that I was, you know, I had a loving parent and it wasn't enough kind of content. Know that you're not alone. Awareness is the first step. You can also check out at Complete Coaching with Crystal for some of the people pleasing, codependency stuff. Please follow both of us. Jess, um, is there anything else you want to add before we completely wrap up with this episode?
I'm going to share just a few statements that I found by NACOA, who is a charity who do incredible work for children of alcoholics. They rely solely on fundraising, and it's these C's that they have on the website, which I think can be so powerful for people to kind of anchor in. But it's I didn't cause it, I can't control it, I can't cure it, I can take care of myself, I can communicate my feelings, I can make healthy choices. And I think having that reminder that you come first, and as deeply painful as it is to watch a loved one struggle with addiction, the best thing you can possibly do is put that gas mask on first and look after yourself. So I really hope this conversation encourages you to do that, whatever that looks like for you, is take that next best step to lead with yourself and put yourself first.
And please rewind that, listen to that again. That was really important, those C's. Jess, thank you so much for joining me today. This was more than I could have ever hoped for myself, for our listeners. Your expertise and your insights were absolutely amazing. I think it's really important for people to know they're not alone. Awareness is the first step. So I'm hoping that this episode really made some people feel aware for the first time. And maybe it's people who are already aware, just it resonated even more. This path forward really does not involve you guys carrying on these roles forever. To all of our listeners, if today's episode resonated with you, remember, just because something was normal for you growing up does not mean that it is healthy or true for you now. And that's where what we're here to unpack together. So, again, as I mentioned before, and I will link Jess's bio and some extra links in our show notes. But be sure to check out Jess on her Instagram at I am Jess Frost for more incredible resources and navigating life as an adult child of an alcoholic. Jess, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your expertise with us today. It's so important for people to know they're not alone and that there's a path forward. It doesn't just involve carrying these roles forever. To all of our listeners, if today's episode resonated with you, remember, just because something was normal for you growing up doesn't mean it's healthy or true for you now. And that's what we're here to unpack together. Be sure to check out Jess on Instagram at I am Jess Frost for more incredible resources on navigating life as an adult child of an alcoholic. Next week, we're diving into a big one. Is fear of being abandoned or disliked normal? We'll unpack why these fears can take such a hold on us, especially for recovering people pleasers, and how to start loosening their grip. So make sure to tune in and you won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, you're not alone. You don't have to live in the past or in anyone else's version of normal.